My name is Jamin Goecker. I'm an associate real estate broker in the state of Alaska, and my mission is to help you to build an intentional and significant legacy for yourself and your family by coaching you in real estate. And today we're going to be giving you the market update for what is going on in Anchorage. It's kind of more of the same. It's kind of what we're seeing. I'm going to give you some specifics today to kind of give you the stats, give you an idea for where we are. But we'll go ahead and go through the stats, and then I'll give you a summary at the very end. But before we get started, as always, make sure you give this video a like, subscribe, do all that good stuff, and let's go and jump into it. Now, the first thing we want to look at is what's going on in the residential real estate market. And what we see in this sector of the market, there are 332 homes that were available on the market this time last year, and now it's sitting right about 325. So you see there's a very small dip in what's available in the market compared to what we saw this time last year. And that's kind of par for the course, really, for what we're seeing for the entire year. If anything, it's actually a good sign that the trend for the year has been that we see a lot less inventory what there is currently. For example, if we look at, let's just take June for instance, there's 382 homes that were available on the market this time last year, and this year it was 231, and that's more or less the trend that we've seen, that there was a significant drop. This time, yes, there are less homes, but not by as much as what we've seen in previous months, so kind of a promising trend. The second thing we want to see is how many homes are actually selling. So this time last year, there was 230 homes sold for the month of October. Now there's 213. So we do see that there's, again, a bit of a drop. Not as much of a drop as what we've seen in previous months this year. Again, for example, if we look at, let's look at August. There was 335 homes that sold last year, and now we see that there was 228. And that more or less was the trend for the entire year. So we're starting to see that the number of sold properties is starting to shift back to being about where it was the year before, and that's a promising trend. Now, the next thing we see is the average sold price went from about $457,000 to about $482,000 for the average sold price year to date. Now, I will also say that's a pretty significant increase. It's not as much of an increase as what we've seen in previous years, because that's about a 5.5% increase for the average sold price. Previous year, it was 7.6, and then 6.9, and then 5.8 back in 2020. So yes, we are still seeing a pretty sizable increase. That, we'll kind of go into some theories as to why that is, but it's kind of par for the course. It's not really the sky is falling. All right, let's go and switch gears real quick and take a look at what's going on in the condo market. Now, the condo market for the entire year has been way below like what the year was before, and especially way below for the inventory for what we usually see. Let me give you some examples real quick here. So back in January of this year, there was 48 condos that were available on the market. The year before, it was 100. Now that seems really low, but it's actually really, really low, because usually around that time of year, we'd see about 320, 350 condos available on the market. So the fact that there was only about 50 gives you an idea of just the minuscule number of condos we had available on the market. Now, the past couple months, we've seen that the condo market is starting to slowly go back up on the amount of inventory that's available. And when I say go back up, I mean just go back up to where it was the previous year, which still, that's a really low level, but it's a little bit better than what we saw the year before. For instance, this time last year, there were 88 condos available on the market, and this year there are 88 condos available on the market for the month of October. Now, that's heartening. At least we're not going down anymore. But usually for this time of year, we'd see somewhere closer to about 400 or so available. So we're still way low, but at least we're not trending downwards anymore. That's really the big takeaway I would see. Now, the next thing we see is that this time last year, there were 104 condos that sold. Now it's 94. So yes, we do see a drop, but not by as much as what we've seen for the previous months of this year. For example, back in, let's take a look at August, there was 119 condos that sold this time last year. Now it's 83. And more or less, that's going to be kind of the trend. We are actually seeing the number of total condos that have sold has actually been fairly comparable to what we usually see. So just because the inventory's gone way down, the demand has gone up. We'll talk more about why that is in the summary, but just put a dog ear on that thought for the moment. Now, the year-to-date average sold price went from about $244,000 to $271,000 this year, just year-over-year increase, which means we're seeing about an 11.2% increase for the average sold price. So that is The biggest increase year over year, really we've seen in the condo market for this time of year, really at any point that I can see in previous years. Going back to 2019, the average sold price was about $211,000. Now, this is very uncommon for condos in Anchorage, just because there's been such a glut of inventory for condos for the longest time in Anchorage that average sold price is really kind of been stagnant right around like 210, 215, somewhere around there. So the fact that we're seeing anything around 270 really does speak to the fact that you have a lot of people that are interested in condos right now because it's kind of a cheaper housing option for a lot of people. And so for that reason, they're going to be interested in condos. Now, whether this is a good move or not, just because it's a little bit more affordable right now, that's a discussion we can have later, but that's kind of the reasoning behind it. Let's go ahead and take a break real quick here. For those of you who've been watching for a bit, you do know that I host a podcast called the Alaskan Journey Podcast. We're going to have some new episodes coming up here very quickly. Some of you are aware I had a brother who was murdered recently, and so I've just kind of been more present for family and less focused on creating podcasts and videos. We are going to have more episodes coming up here soon, so do make sure you go check that out. It's a treasure trove, interviews and conversations with people who've recently moved up here and been here for a while, so do make sure you go check out some of the older episodes, and we'll have some new stuff up here soon. Now, let's go and finish up today's market update, looking at the multifamily market and finally giving you that summary. Now, looking at the multifamily market, we're actually seeing kind of a continuation of a trend that we've seen really starting around July. So in July, we saw for the first time in years that number of multifamily properties that were available actually went up year over year. Now, it's still really small, compressed market compared to what we usually have for this time of year. But the fact that we were seeing an increase for the year over year is at least a trend that's going in a favorable direction if you're an investor and looking to jump into this market. To give you an idea, about this time last year, we had 61 multifamily properties that were available, and now there's 87. So again, kind of the same thing on the residential side. It's an increase, but normally we'd see about 180 to 200 multifamily properties available on the market this time of year. So still really compressed compared to what we usually see this time of year, but it's really that trend that we're looking for. So that's promising, and I'll take the silver linings where we can get them. Now, the number of multifamily properties that have sold in Anchorage in October went from 33 this time last year to 23 this year. So we are seeing a bit of a decrease in the number of multifamily properties that are selling, at least for the month of October. We see actually leading up to that there was an increase year over year for some months, and we are actually seeing the number of multifamily properties total being sold for the year decreasing, which is understandable. Once you see those interest rates go up, it really does impact investing a lot more directly than it would with just a simple primary residence house. So not a huge surprise there, but that is what it is. Last but not least, we see that the average sold price went from about $509,000 this time last year to about $485,000 even this year. So that is a little bit of a decrease. Honestly, it's very difficult to extrapolate anything useful when we're looking at the average sold price for multifamilies, just because it does incorporate everything from duplexes all the way up to like the big commercial property. So it's very difficult to extrapolate a lot of useful information. I kind of suspect we still do see a trending upwards for multifamily properties if you look at the individual properties, just because as inflation takes more and more effect, the rents go up, which does make those properties more valuable. So yes, we do see a decrease across the average. It really does depend on what kind of properties sold this year compared to what properties sold last year. Were they all like big properties that were like 10 units or more last year, and now it's just duplexes? I couldn't say just based off of this, but I suspect it's probably something more like that. And once we start getting down to like 23 properties that sold for the month, the size, the sample that we're looking at is just so small, you can get extremes that come out of the data. So that's what we're seeing there. Now for the summary, what we're seeing across the board. If you're looking at the residential side, it's a promising trend that you're starting to see more options coming onto the market. I am not expecting us to return to pre-COVID levels anytime soon. And the reason for that is just about everyone has a really low interest rate. So it's going to take a lot to shake a lot of these sellers loose and let the home go that's got like a 3% interest rate just so they can go buy something at about 6.5% or 7%. Now we have seen some decreases in the interest rates recently. And I mean, some people we've been working with, that's been really motivating. I don't know if it's enough to motivate people who aren't already looking for a house to suddenly jump into looking for a house. Now, if you're already looking for one and you get that, that's great news and that's motivating for them. I just don't know if it's enough to inspire someone who's not already in that process to suddenly jump into the process. I'm not expecting the average sold price to come down anytime soon. So if you're one of those people on the fence just waiting for this big crash to happen, I'm really not expecting to see that happening anytime soon, because when it comes down to it, supply and demand trumps about any other theory we can have out there. And right now, the supply is just so low that it's just not enough to keep up with the demand, even though the demand is less than what it was a couple of years ago. Looking at the condo market, that's a favorable indication. For the first time in decades, you're actually seeing an increase for value for the condos in Anchorage. For those of you who are considering it as a more affordable option, it is that. It is more affordable, and do improvements and a bunch of stuff on it. Just across the board, it's going to be a lot more affordable. You have to keep in mind, though, usually condos do not increase at this rate in Anchorage. If the inventory suddenly shoots back up there, you're probably going to be more or less at that stagnant level that we were in decades past. So that's just something to really keep in mind. There's some pros and there's some cons to it. So this has been your summary looking at the market over in Anchorage. Thank you for watching. If you have questions, do feel free to reach out to me, and we'll see you next time.